The cafe was alive with chatter, the clink of cups, and the soft hum of conversation, until something shifted. A man started being rude to a waitress. His words were sharp, dismissive, and disrespectful, cutting through the calm of the room. Heads turned, people whispered, and the energy in the air thickened. The waitress froze, unsure how to respond, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to keep her composure. Then, in walked Bruce Lee. Not loud, not flashy, just calm, composed, and moving with a presence that immediately drew every eye. There was something about the way he walked, the focus in his gaze, the quiet authority that seemed to bend a room around him. People instinctively leaned forward, sensing that a moment unlike any other was about to unfold. The man, unaware of the silent attention building, continued his rude behavior, confident no one would challenge him. But Bruce stopped a few feet away, his eyes locking onto the situation with laser precision. There was no shouting, no dramatic gestures, just a calm, steady gaze that spoke volumes. Every heartbeat in the cafe seemed to slow. Every whisper faded, and anticipation rippled through the crowd. The question now hung in the air: what would Bruce Lee do next? And how would his presence change everything? Bruce Lee didn't rush. He stood there, calm and measured, observing the scene with a quiet intensity. Every movement, every breath seemed deliberate. The man's words had already started to falter under the weight of Bruce's gaze, though he didn't yet realize it. The waitress, still frozen, felt a mix of relief and curiosity. Something about Bruce made the air itself feel different, as if his presence alone demanded respect. Around them, the cafe seemed to shrink. Conversations hushed, cups paused mid-air, and eyes fixed on the unfolding tension. Bruce didn't raise his voice, didn't gesture aggressively. Instead, he projected focus, awareness, and a calm authority that drew everyone in. The rude man shifted slightly, sensing that he was no longer in control of the moment, yet unsure what to do. Every onlooker could feel it. The anticipation, the unspoken question: how would Bruce respond? Would he confront the man directly? Would he correct him silently? The suspense built not through action, but through the awareness of potential. Bruce's eyes met the waitress's briefly, a subtle acknowledgement that she was safe, that he had the situation in hand. In that instant, it became clear to everyone watching. This wasn't just a casual encounter. This was a moment about respect, presence, and influence, where calm mastery could speak louder than any words. The man continued, his voice sharper now, attempting to reclaim the control he thought he had. But the effect of Bruce Lee's presence was undeniable. Each word he spoke felt smaller, less powerful, as if the room itself had shifted around Bruce. He didn't move hastily or raise his voice. Instead, he let the silence do the work, letting the tension stretch just long enough for every person in the cafe to feel it. The waitress, still standing frozen, watched Bruce carefully. There was a calmness about him that contrasted sharply with the man's bluster. The contrast made the rude behavior even more glaring, highlighting the difference between reaction and control. Bruce's posture was relaxed, yet his focus was absolute. Every small movement, from the tilt of his head to the slight shift of his weight, carried meaning. It wasn't threatening, but it radiated authority. Around them, the cafe was alive with anticipation. Conversations had ceased. Whispers had given way to silent stares. People unconsciously leaned in, imagining the moment from every angle. The tension wasn't just in the immediate situation, it extended to the audience. Viewers at home or in the cafe could feel their own hearts synchronize with the anticipation, imagining the subtle dynamics of respect, authority, and self-restraint. The man tried again, this time louder, as if volume could counteract the unseen weight pressing down on him. But Bruce Lee's eyes remained steady, fixed on the situation, reading the subtle cues in posture, facial expression, and tone. The man hesitated, confusion flickering across his face. For the first time, he realized that this wasn't a confrontation he could dominate. Bruce didn't need to move yet. His calm composure was already doing the work. Every spectator could sense that a response was coming, and it would not be ordinary. The air seemed to tighten, the room holding its collective breath, as if even the walls waited to see what would happen. The subtle energy shift, the mental pressure, and the implied control created a suspense that felt almost tangible. And then, the audience could see it. Bruce's 3 words were coming. The anticipation rippled through every person present. All eyes were on him, all hearts beating a little faster, wondering, what would he say? How would he handle a man who thought rudeness could go unchecked? The moment was suspended, perfect in its tension, drawing every viewer into the psychology of calm mastery versus reckless aggression. Bruce Lee finally spoke, and it was just 3 words. Not shouted, not loud, simply spoken calm, deliberate. But the effect was immediate. The man froze mid-sentence, as though the words themselves had created a barrier he couldn't cross. The cafe seemed to pause along with him. Time stretched for a heartbeat. The weight of the moment settled over everyone present. You could see it in the waitress's eyes, a mix of astonishment, relief, and disbelief. She had been bracing for confrontation, expecting some grand gesture, maybe a verbal battle, or even a physical warning. Instead, what happened was subtler, yet far more powerful. Those 3 words carried authority, respect, and precision. The audience felt it too, even from their seats or through screens at home. Every person present sensed that Bruce's calm mastery had shifted the dynamics of the situation entirely. It wasn't just about correcting rude behavior. It was about influence, about commanding a room without aggression, and about asserting dignity for someone else without needing to dominate. The man's expression shifted, the arrogance draining slowly from his face, replaced by a mixture of confusion, respect, and self-reflection. The subtle power of Bruce's presence became clear. He didn't need to yell or force compliance. The anticipation of his reaction, the weight behind his measured steps, and the authority in his eyes had already done most of the work. The room had absorbed the lesson before any action had even taken place. People felt the mental gravity of the moment. Calmness could outweigh bluster, presence could outweigh volume, and focused confidence could overpower recklessness. Meanwhile, the waitress exhaled quietly, the tension leaving her body in a flood. She hadn't realized she was holding her breath until that moment, watching Bruce Lee's composed stance and the subtle impact of his words. The situation that had threatened embarrassment or confrontation had transformed into a moment of admiration and awe. The contrast between the rude man's initial confidence and Bruce's quiet authority created a profound psychological shift, not just for him, but for everyone in the room. Observers couldn't help but reflect on the scene themselves. You, imagining yourself in the cafe, could feel your heartbeat quicken as you tried to gauge what you might do in such a situation. Would you have the courage to step in? Would you remain silent? Would your words have the same weight as Bruce's? The script of the moment unfolded around the psychological interplay, showing that influence doesn't always rely on strength or volume. It relies on perception, timing, and the calm mastery of presence. The rude man's body language changed subtly, but unmistakably. His shoulders sagged slightly, his gaze flickered, and the confidence that had radiated only moments before now seemed fragile. It was a mental surrender rather than a verbal one. Bruce had shifted the power dynamics entirely, not through confrontation, but by calmly asserting dignity, awareness, and authority. Every person watching recognized that the resolution wasn't just in the words themselves, but in the calm, unshakable delivery behind them. The audience, whether physically present or mentally imagining the scenario, was now fully engaged. They felt relief, awe, and the subtle thrill of witnessing social mastery unfold. The tension that had built during the escalation phase had been replaced by a reflective pause. Viewers were encouraged to put themselves in the position of the waitress, the rude man, or even Bruce himself. Every emotion, from disbelief to admiration, was heightened by the clarity and simplicity of the 3 words and the way they were delivered. Have you ever seen someone handle a tense situation with calmness instead of confrontation? How did it affect you? Share your experience in the comments. This moment became a lesson in subtle power and psychological influence. The suspense and tension had reached a crescendo, but the payoff wasn't physical. It was emotional, mental, and reflective. The audience had been drawn into the scenario, feeling the shift in dynamics, the impact of calm authority, and the transformative effect of respectful intervention. Bruce Lee had demonstrated mastery not through aggression, but through presence, precision, and quiet influence, a lesson that lingered long after the moment passed. The man's reaction to Bruce Lee's 3 words was immediate but subtle. His arrogance, which had filled the room only moments before, began to crumble. He straightened in his seat, then slumped slightly, as if the weight of his own behavior had finally been recognized. There was no shouting, no angry response, just the quiet shift of someone realizing they had misjudged the moment, misjudged the person, and perhaps misjudged themselves. Bruce Lee didn't raise his voice or make a show of dominance. He simply stood there, calm and steady, his eyes still focused on the man, radiating quiet authority. The subtlety of his approach made the impact even stronger. Every person watching could feel the mental shift. The rude man's energy, once loud and imposing, was replaced with hesitation, self-awareness, and the first stirrings of respect. It was a psychological victory before any further action even occurred. The waitress, who had been tense and uncertain just moments earlier, felt a wave of relief and amazement. She exhaled slowly, realizing the situation had been diffused in a way she hadn't anticipated. Her astonishment wasn't just about Bruce Lee's words, but the calm confidence, the mastery of presence, and the subtle yet undeniable influence he wielded without aggression. She could hardly speak, her mind processing the lesson in real time. Onlookers in the cafe mirrored her reaction. Some whispered, others shook their heads in disbelief. It wasn't about fear, it was about recognition. The audience could see that Bruce Lee's mastery lay not in intimidation or force, but in the precise application of awareness, timing, and psychological insight. His calmness amplified the effect of his words, showing that true influence comes from control, presence, and the ability to read a situation perfectly. The man, now visibly humbled, glanced at the waitress, then back at Bruce. His body language shifted again, more openly now. Shoulders lowered, eyes softened, a subtle acknowledgement that he had been corrected without humiliation. He hadn't been dominated with aggression, nor had he been embarrassed with ridicule. Instead, he had been guided into awareness by the quiet authority of someone who commanded respect naturally. Every detail of the moment, the slowness of his realization, the calm that followed, the ripple of relief and admiration through the room, was magnified for the audience. Viewers, whether imagining themselves there or watching from afar, felt the tension resolve in a satisfying, almost cathartic way. They weren't just witnessing a correction, they were witnessing mastery in action, a demonstration of influence and respect that transcended mere words. Bruce Lee finally nodded subtly to the waitress, acknowledging her dignity and the successful resolution of the situation. The man, now silent, accepted the unspoken lesson. The energy in the cafe shifted from tense anticipation to quiet admiration, a collective recognition of the power of calmness, presence, and controlled authority. The psychological climax was complete. The audience, whether physically present or imagining themselves there, could feel the full impact, the awe, the surprise, the subtle thrill of seeing tension diffused with intelligence instead of aggression. Bruce Lee had transformed a potentially confrontational encounter into a timeless lesson in respect, influence, and human behavior. The climax didn't need spectacle. Its power came from subtlety, psychological precision, and calm presence. Every viewer, every witness, understood that influence isn't about aggression. It's about awareness, composure, and respect. The lesson was clear. Mastery can be silent, yet its impact is undeniable. The cafe slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the energy in the room had shifted permanently. Conversations resumed, though quieter now, tinged with admiration and reflection. Bruce Lee didn't linger. He simply offered a subtle nod to the waitress, a gesture that acknowledged her resilience and the respect he had just reinforced, and then turned to leave. His presence lingered like a gentle echo, a reminder of the power of composure, focus, and respect. The waitress, still absorbing the encounter, realized how completely the tension had been diffused without force or confrontation. She had been standing in the middle of a potentially humiliating situation, yet Bruce's calm mastery had changed everything in an instant. The relief she felt was accompanied by awe. She understood, in that quiet, suspended moment, that power isn't always visible. It doesn't need to be loud, flashy, or aggressive. Sometimes the greatest impact comes from presence, timing, and precision. The man who had been rude now sat quietly, his expression reflective. He had experienced a shift that was more profound than any scolding or punishment could have achieved. Bruce Lee's 3 words had served as both a correction and a lesson, delivered in a way that preserved dignity while instilling awareness. The psychological effect of being addressed calmly, yet firmly, had prompted introspection, leaving him, and the witnesses, understanding that respect is earned, not demanded. Around the cafe, every onlooker felt the lesson in a personal way. They had watched a simple exchange transform into a masterclass in subtle influence and emotional intelligence. The scene wasn't just about one person correcting another. It was about demonstrating the impact of restraint, the weight of presence, and the quiet authority that comes from skill and self-control. For anyone imagining themselves in that moment, it was easy to feel a ripple of reflection. How would you handle a tense situation like this? Could calmness, focus, and precision have more effect than anger or confrontation? Bruce Lee's actions provided an unspoken framework for navigating conflict. Observers could see that true mastery lies not in aggression, but in understanding human behavior, choosing the right moment to act, and delivering influence with clarity and respect. The takeaway was clear. Strength isn't always physical, and power isn't always visible. Emotional intelligence, composure, and thoughtfulness can create outcomes far more impactful than intimidation or loud authority ever could. For the audience watching at home, this moment also invited personal reflection. What would you have done in the waitress's position? Could you have absorbed the calm authority without panic? If you were the rude person, how would you have felt facing someone who communicated respect and influence without aggression? These questions transform the story from passive observation into an active mental exercise, encouraging viewers to internalize the lesson for themselves. If you were in the waitress's shoes, how would Bruce Lee's calm words have made you feel? Share below. By the time Bruce Lee left the cafe, the impact was clear and lasting. What could have been a confrontational, stressful moment had become a lesson in presence, dignity, and influence. Witnesses carried the memory with them, quietly amazed, reflecting on how composure and skill could change a moment entirely. The story wasn't about confrontation or dominance. It was about how mastery, focus, and calmness can create a ripple effect of respect, understanding, and personal growth. Ultimately, this encounter was more than a simple interaction. It was a demonstration of how behavior, attitude, and presence influence others. The lesson extended beyond the cafe walls. In any tense situation, calm confidence and thoughtful intervention can leave a stronger, longer-lasting impact than force, volume, or aggression. Every observer, from the waitress to the man, to those imagining themselves watching, had learned something subtle but profound. Do you believe calmness and composure can change situations more effectively than force? Type yes or no and explain why. The takeaway was timeless. Respect, mastery, and quiet influence create change not through aggression, but through focus, awareness, and thoughtful action. The cafe had witnessed it firsthand, and so had everyone imagining the scene in their minds. As the cafe slowly returned to its usual rhythm, the audience, both present and imagining the scene, couldn't help but replay the moment over and over in their minds. Bruce Lee's 3 words had done more than correct rude behavior. They had created a ripple effect, a subtle demonstration of influence, calmness, and mastery. Every person in the room had been drawn into the psychology of the encounter, feeling the tension, the anticipation, and ultimately, the relief and admiration that followed. Take a moment to imagine yourself there. You're watching a potentially tense situation unfold in real time. There's an imbalance of confidence, perhaps even arrogance, on one side, and on the other, a calm presence that doesn't raise its voice or try to dominate. How does it feel to watch the dynamics shift with nothing more than intention, awareness, and a carefully chosen word or two? That's what makes this encounter so compelling. It isn't just a story of confrontation. It's a lesson in human behavior, influence, and the power of presence. For the waitress, it had been a moment of vulnerability. She had been unsure, even fearful, of how to respond, and for a second, she felt completely exposed. But Bruce Lee's calmness allowed her to regain composure without feeling embarrassed or powerless. The audience could feel that relief too, seeing someone assert dignity and respect not with force, but through mastery, subtlety, and timing. It's a powerful reminder that true strength often shows up quietly, without spectacle, but with undeniable impact. The man, meanwhile, was transformed in a way that was almost imperceptible at first. There was no dramatic apology, no outburst of guilt, just a shift in posture, a flicker of awareness, a moment of reflection. That subtle change illustrated an essential truth. Influence doesn't require volume, aggression, or intimidation. Instead, it comes from understanding, presence, and knowing precisely how and when to act. Every observer could sense it. The shift wasn't only happening in him, but in the room, and even in their own perception of what influence and respect truly mean. For the viewers, this moment invites introspection. How would you have reacted if you were the waitress, the rude man, or even onlooker? Could you remain composed in the face of aggression? Would you recognize influence when it's quiet, subtle, and controlled? By imagining yourself in these roles, you not only engage with the story, but you internalize its lessons. The narrative transforms from passive observation into active mental participation. Every viewer has the chance to reflect on their own behavior, their responses to tension, and the ways they could create positive influence in their own lives. This reflection extends beyond any single moment. Whether at work, in social situations, or even online, the lessons remain the same. Calmness, clarity, and composure can diffuse tension. Awareness, timing, and careful communication can change outcomes more effectively than force or volume. And respect, earned and demonstrated quietly, resonates far longer than intimidation or aggression ever could. Bruce Lee's 3 words weren't just a moment of correction. They were a living lesson in human dynamics, subtly teaching mastery, patience, and dignity. If you were in the cafe witnessing this, which role would you relate to most? The calm influencer, the rude individual, or the observer? Why? Every viewer is invited to consider the power of composure in their own life. The story doesn't end when Bruce Lee leaves the cafe. It continues in the reflection, the discussion, and the way people internalize the lesson. It encourages personal growth, empathy, and awareness of the impact of presence in tense situations. The beauty of this narrative is its universality. No matter where a viewer is from, the story resonates because it taps into human psychology, tension, anticipation, conflict, and resolution through skill, awareness, and respect. It's a template for storytelling that draws viewers in, keeps them engaged, and leaves them thinking long after the video ends. By inviting reflection and opinion, the narrative ensures that engagement continues beyond the moment itself. Viewers are encouraged to imagine, to empathize, and to respond, creating a conversation that reinforces the lesson and amplifies the emotional impact. The calm, masterful resolution leaves them with a sense of satisfaction and insight, a mental takeaway that is both personal and universally relatable.